Humans only make up about 1/10,000th of the biomass on Earth, but our impact on the planet is drastically out of proportion to our numbers. In the last 250 years, we have added over 400 billion tons of carbon to the atmosphere, and approximately half of that has happened since the mid-1980s. No other organism in Earth's history has altered the environment so much so quickly. It's not just the amount of pollution we produce either. Humans have invented entirely new kinds of pollution too. Polythene, chlorofluorocarbons, and synthetic hormones didn't exist in the environment until humans created them. Other toxins like heavy metals and radioactive isotopes were only there in trace amounts until the industrial age found new ways to refine and concentrate them. These pollutants are toxic because they are too new for life to have evolved a way of dealing with them, which means they don't get broken down either. A 2007 study found more than 24 synthetic chemicals and pesticides in wild salmon, and non-toxic pollutants can be just as harmful. Fertilizers that run off the land into rivers can cause such a sudden explosion of algae that waterways are blocked with green slime. When this dies and decays, the surge in bacteria depletes the water of oxygen and kills off the fish. But pollution is entirely within our power to control. In 1952, the Great Smog of London killed an estimated 12,000 people over 4 days, but 4 years later the Clean Air Act was passed and air quality steadily improved. The countries that were once the biggest polluters have also been the first to introduce emissions standards. Just 50 years ago, New York City was plagued by a dense smog responsible for around 24 deaths per day, but air pollution legislation and incentives have helped to drastically improve the city's air quality. The Big Apple is even working towards achieving the cleanest air of any major US city by the year 2030. The technological progress that created the pollution can also be harnessed to curb it. Cleaner fuels, more efficient engines, better recycling, and environmental cleanup technologies are all being developed to slow the rate at which humans are poisoning the planet. From huge garbage-sucking machines in the ocean to neighborhood recycling schemes, there is a way for everyone to help ensure that Earth's most polluted century is behind us. Land pollution isn't just about the space that is taken up by landfill. A city the size of New York could fit all of its rubbish for the next 1,000 years in a landfill 56 kilometers long by 56 kilometers wide. That sounds like a lot, but that's the waste of just 2.5% of Americans, buried in just 0.3% of the country's land area. And that land isn't gone forever. Eventually, a landfill site will just become a grassy hill. The real source of land pollution is all of the other things that don't end up in landfill. Copper and aluminium mining generate huge piles of powdered rock called tailings left behind after the metal has been extracted. These tailings are high in toxic heavy metals such as mercury and cadmium, and aluminium mining alone generates more than 77 million tons of tailings worldwide every single year. Modern farming also requires more than just sunshine and rain. In the UK, farmers add an average of 100 kilograms of nitrogen fertilizer to every hectare of arable land and grassland each year. Whatever the crops don't absorb gets washed into the groundwater and ends up in our rivers, going from land to water pollution. The low-tech solutions to land pollution are the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, and these are in decreasing order of effectiveness. Reducing the amount of cardboard or cabbage you need to buy in the first place has a much bigger impact than simply recycling all the leftovers, because it also saves the energy that would have been required to process and transport them to you and then collect and recycle them again afterwards. But there are high-tech pollution solutions as well. Bioremediation uses selected strains of naturally occurring organisms to break down contaminants in the soil. Wood fungi, for example, have been shown to be able to break down the toxins in oil spills and also certain chlorine pesticides. Heavy metals like cadmium and lead can't be broken down, but certain plants will take them up through their roots and store them in their leaves or stems. This technique, which is known as phytoremediation, uses plants to soak pollutants from the ground so that they can be removed more easily. Air pollution is the introduction of gases and particles into the atmosphere that have harmful effects on living creatures and the built environment. According to the World Health Organization, 7 million premature deaths are caused every year by people inhaling polluted air. That's 1 in 8 deaths worldwide. Once released into the atmosphere, pollutants are impossible to contain and, depending on prevailing weather patterns, have the potential to affect people who are hundreds or even thousands of kilometers from the source. Over the last half-century, the nature of the problem has altered. In the developed world, smoke-causing emissions of noxious smoke, sulfur dioxide, and particulates associated with incomplete fuel combustion have been curbed by technologies like flue gas desulfurization systems, soot scrubbers, and catalytic converters. Cases that deplete the stratospheric ozone layer most aggressively have been outlawed and replaced by safer compounds, and today it's the threat of global warming that looms largest. There is growing evidence, however, that respiratory problems like asthma might actually be caused by air pollution, not just triggered by it. Some researchers have even made tentative links between neighborhood air quality and rates of childhood autism. As with other forms of pollution, the best way to protect the environment is to avoid releasing these toxic elements in the first place. Conserving electricity, driving mindfully, and choosing to walk, cycle, or take public transport are easy choices we can all make in order to breathe just a little easier. Oceans cover 71% of our planet's surface and contain an estimated 1.5 million species, but that hasn't stopped humanity treating the sea as a giant watery rubbish bin. We are familiar with tragic images of seabirds whose feathers are clogged with viscous black oil, but catastrophic spills from tankers account for just a fraction of oil pollution in the sea. Street runoff, vehicle exhausts, and industrial waste are all chronic contributors to the problem. Indeed, almost all marine pollution stems from activities on land. Runoff from farms introduces pesticides and insecticides into the aquatic food chain, as well as an overabundance of nutrients in the form of fertilizer. This causes populations of algae to spike, draining the surrounding waters of oxygen and suffocating other marine life. Finally, human-made rubbish is ubiquitous throughout the world's oceans, where it is corralled by currents into vast swirling garbage patches. Many items, including fishing gear, glass, metal, paper, cloth, and rubber, can take years, decades, or even centuries to decompose in some cases. The worst offenders, plastics, essentially persist forever, but are broken down under the sun's UV rays into ever smaller pieces. The eventual soup of microplastics, invisible to the naked eye, poses a threat to wildlife that ingests it and to the entire food chain due to the leaching of harmful chemicals. There are no easy solutions, but a burst of new technologies may begin to turn the tide. In just 18 months, Mr. Trash Wheel, a filtering water wheel with its own Twitter account, has removed over 400 tons of rubbish from Inner Harbor in Baltimore. newest proposals for open ocean filtration systems include a solar-powered vacuum boat called SeaVax that its inventors claim will suck up 22,000 tons of garbage each year. The most common items washed up on beaches include plastic bottles and cutlery and coffee cup lids. The good news is that means we can help by making simple changes to our lifestyles, like carrying reusable water bottles and utensils. Is the most common item found on beach. Cleanups making up 25% of all collected debris. They contain a synthetic fiber that takes years to break down. An aluminium oxide coating makes aluminium cans very resistant to dissolving in seawater. Frustratingly, they are one of the simplest items to recycle. Plastics degrade into tiny pieces, but they never fully disappear. Americans alone throw away over 35 billion plastic water bottles per year. Nappies disposable are made from multiple layers, including various long-lived plastics like polythene and polyester. They easily outlive the child that wears them.